improving information relevance, accessibility, and legitimacy, how key intermediary organizations develop and distribute sports injury prevention and safety promotion resources. By Cherie Bicker. In healthcare intervention research, including sports injury prevention, there is a 17-year time lag between efficacious interventions being produced through research and their use in practice. This time lag is likely even more pronounced for injury prevention in community sports settings, because of the gap in the development of interventions suitable for community sports settings. Often, interventions developed for elite sports settings are presumed to filter down to use at the community level. And so the refrain, "bridge the gap," is one we frequently use in relation to this 17-year time lag between intervention research and its use in practice. Generally, the science of knowledge translation aims to bridge this gap between research and practice in three ways. Firstly, by addressing the relevance of research for practice. This is achieved by looking at the timeliness, salience, and actionability of research outputs. Secondly, knowledge translation activities address accessibility, the formatting and availability of research findings for practice. Finally, knowledge translation addresses legitimacy, or the credibility of research outputs for practice. The aim of this study was to determine and describe knowledge translation processes undertaken by a set of key intermediary organizations, in other words, what they did to address research knowledge relevance, accessibility, and legitimacy for end users. Therefore, this study sought novel insight into how key intermediary organizations work to bridge the gap between research and practice in sports settings. The key intermediary organisations were drawn from the National Guidance for Australian Football Partnerships and Safety Project, which provided clear and purposeful context for this study. The participants were the self-nominated representatives from the following NOGAPS partnership organisations: Australian Football League, Victorian Health Promotion Foundation, JLT Sport, a division of an insurance company, Sport and Recreation Victoria, Sports Medicine Australia. These representatives participated in individual face-to-face interviews, and qualitative descriptive methodology was used to understand their perceptions and experiences of the sports injury prevention and safety promotion knowledge translation role undertaken by their respective organization. So what did we find? These key intermediary organizations undertook three clear themes of processes in addressing the translation of knowledge for end users. Firstly, they identified a need for knowledge translation. Secondly, they developed and disseminated resources. Third, they addressed barriers and enablers to knowledge translation. So let's look at each of these processes and what they did in more detail. In identifying a need for knowledge translation, these organizations first identified community sports injury prevention and safety promotion issues that required more knowledge to be made available. These issues were identified in a number of ways: monitoring of research, monitoring of sport, government agendas, organizational goals, collaboration, monitoring of media. Once the need has been identified, these key intermediary organizations may develop and disseminate resources to address these topics. The development of resources generally occurs in one of four ways: commission of resources, commission of research to underpin resources, in-house development, and updating or review. Two distinct distribution pathways are usually used: direct, in which the resources are distributed directly to the sports clubs/associations; indirect, in which the resources are posted onto their websites, or shared via social media, for example. The third process that informs the knowledge translation processes of these key intermediary organizations is the addressing of barriers and enablers. 4 key barriers and 2 key enablers emerged. Framing, in both instances, refer to the framing of resources for injury prevention or performance enhancement or health promotion. So what does this all mean in relation to the broader knowledge translation literature and bridging that 17-year research to practice gap? According to these key intermediary organizations, these overall processes were necessary to what they considered the irrelevancy, inaccessibility, and illegitimacy of research knowledge for community sports settings. In fact, as this participant stated, I would just say there is a little bit of a gap between research in its purest form versus reviews of research and putting together resources. We have a gap, and by a gap I mean often when we commission research the end reports and the products are written for researchers by researchers and they're not really translated well into a product that an organization can digest and use immediately. It takes on a lot of translation and then some further work before we get to a point where it's something that we can actually adopt quickly or implement or recommend that other groups pick up and implement. Therefore, it was clear that the implementation of research knowledge, where the gap is so often theorized to sit, is preceded by a gap in the translation of research knowledge. Community sports clubs simply are not aware of evidence-based injury prevention and safety promotion knowledge. As this research has shown, there is a complexity of processes that these key intermediary organizations undertake to make our research knowledge palatable for those at community sports clubs to pick up and use. Which begs the question: should we be conceptualizing our intervention research differently from the start, so as not to unnecessarily and artificially create this knowledge translation gap in the first place? Thank you.